It has been 3 years since Sunset Shimmer returned home to Equestria, and when she had returned home, Twilight had offered her a position as a teacher at School of Friendship in Magic, which Sunset immediately accepted. She didn't have any problem to teach magic to her students, and even including some other teachers like Applejack, Rarity, and the others, who actually liked her personality. She had been proving so skilled in magic, despite to be a former student to Celestia. Even though there were some things that she missed the most, and that was in fact to have a special sound pony. Despite having so much love from her friends, but there was she missed to have some pony to be with. Even though summer she dated a couple of stallions in from town, but she didn't felt any sort of connection to any of them. So even though the Rarity one day suggested maybe that she could try speed dating, there has been recently opened this location in town where they have openness. So she asked Rarity more details how speed dating works, just in case of if she wanted to try it. Rarity hasn't even tried herself, but she had learned how the entire thing is working. And after Sunset had learned at least how it works, she decided why not to give it a try. So one Friday afternoon, after school was over, she went to this location to try to see if there was any stallions that maybe she could maybe connect it to. She did recognize the several stallions and even some mares, even including some of her old dates that were also there. And she even saw her friend Roseluck. Roseluck and Sunset have been a good friends since Sunset moved to Ponyville. And during her time doing this speed dating, she was matched with several stallions, but she didn't feel sort of any connection to either of them. She was even introduced on some mares as well, but mostly for just for fun, maybe. I don't know. She thinks that's all, at least. But before this entire thing ended, she was matched with Roseluck. Both of them amazed or surprised about this, but both laughed a little bit, but they actually small talked and having a good time. Even after speeding was over around 4 p.m., even afterwards, Sunset was standing outside. Maybe that she asked herself if she would try to do speed dating another time when Roseluck walks out and says that was a bit surprised that both would end at the same table. And even Sunset laughed about it, said, "Yeah, that was really surprising," she said. And then Sunset asked if Roseluck was hungry. After all, it was only 4 p.m., and that maybe if she wanted to go somewhere to maybe grab something to eat, maybe as early dinner or something. And Roseluck said that she would like to do so because she was getting hungry herself. So they went to this Haybird restaurant nearby, and even there, they small talk about what's the reason why they want to start doing this speed dating. Roseluck said that since she had recently broken up with her recent boyfriend, well, at least a couple of weeks earlier, she wanted to try this speed dating that she has heard about. And she asked about the same for Sunset. But Sunset said that she hasn't been in any relationship for at least for a while, and she had been introduced by speed dating by from Rarity, at least being informed about this how it works, and she wanted to give it a try, even though she didn't felt any sort of connection to those matches, but she wanted speed dating. Same thing for Roseluck. The only pony that she felt some connection to was actually Sunset, and she even admits that to her. And Sunset a little bit surprised because she didn't expect that for an answer, but she was at least happy that she was matched with a friend. But despite this, both are having a good time at this restaurant for this small restaurant to have though. Even afterwards, then Sunset asked just by randomly if Roseluck would been date a mare. She just as she know for sure. And Roseluck said that she would actually date a mare, but she hasn't even found the right mare to be considered been dating though. After all, there has she hasn't even been given much a thought about that first though. So even after that asked that, they said goodbye to each other, and at the castle, Sunset was laying on her bed and thinking about her time, her experience at the speed dating, and her time with afterwards with Rosamund. And after that, a question, and that Rosamund admitted she would be able to, would consider it to date Amir. Even though Sunset didn't mind at the end of this, but she didn't pay much attention more about that, and much later on, she fell asleep as normal. But the next day at school of friendship, where they asked Sunset how this speed dating worked, how it worked, and if there was something for her, the things like that. Even though Sunset said that she had just been recently tried, and well, she didn't know it first, but she said that she didn't felt any connection to any of those opponents there, but she was willing to give it a second try, and she was going to do so the same afternoon. And Rarity, with her luck, and since Rarity herself wasn't in any need of being dating, after all, she has already been dating Spike for the past 2 years. The same afternoon, Sunset went back to the same location of speed dating. This time, she didn't see Roseluck anywhere. Maybe that she decided maybe to wait to give it a second try. So she went there, and she did match to several stallions and a couple of mares, but none of them did match to her in her connection to, except for one stallion. Maybe that he could be the one that she has been looking for. After all, they have this almost common same interest in music and food styles and something like that. So he asked her out on a date after they left the rest of this location. So, and she said yes. So for the next couple of days, Sunset was really happy to at least maybe have found a potential as a boyfriend. But even though that her mind maybe she didn't want to rush too far, too fast with this new potential of relationship because she didn't want to lose her potential as a new a new first boyfriend in a long time. Even when she told her friends about this, they were actually excited to hear that Sunset may have found a boyfriend. And even though that this boyfriend or this stallion was very gentle to her, treat her well, always kindness, ask her questions like how her day were, something like that, and she felt well appreciated. She felt loved for a long time. And for the next couple of weeks, their relationship seems to be working. They had only been on like at least a couple of dates, and Sunset may have considered that the stallion as her boyfriend. But then, the thing all that changed for her life entirely. This stallion told Sunset that he had been offered of a new position of his work as a carpenter in Manhattan, and that would have meant they would be in a long distance relationship. And unfortunately, Sunset didn't seem that this would want to work. So she broke up their relationship that what he had, and only a few days later, he moved to Maidhead. Once again, Sunset was heartbroken. She had finally believed that she had found the right stallion or the right pony to be with. And just only a couple of days after this heartbreaking, she was sitting in the park and cried a lot when suddenly she heard a voice, and it was actually Roseluck. Roseluck was out for a walk during her lunch break when she found Sunset at the park. Roseluck was not aware of what just had happened to Sunset recently. When she asked what was wrong, and Sunset explained what happened, and Roseluck was just devastated. She was really sad for her friend had been recently breaking up her potential as a boyfriend. Sunset asked, Roseluck asked if she could sit down, and Sunset just nodded and said yes. And even despite after all this happened, Roseluck was well there for her friend to cheer her up, and she even tried to ask if she were to try this speed dating once again though. But Sunset said no. She is done with speed dating. She thought maybe this could have been the one that could have saved, given her a chance to be happy for once. But now she decided not to be doing any dating for at least for the time being. She wanted to work and focus on her life now. And even Roseluck thought maybe that was for best after this recent breakup, and sometimes emotional breakups are not the best to do when you start to go back into dating again. So Sunset said that she might go back to dating, but not for the time being. And for the next couple of months, she decided not to be able to date. Even though her friends like Twilight and Rarity and the others was really surprised and even a bit worried about Sunset. Because during her class she appeared to be happy and answered questions for the students before matching guests normally. But after that, she prefers them stays mostly in her room or takes a walk by herself. She rarely speaks to anyone anymore. She started like avoiding their friends as much as she can do. And for that, Twilight was getting a bit worried about Sunset. But that will all change because one day when Sunset went to the park, she met up with Roseluck. She was there just having a good time by herself. Roseluck and Sunset sat next to each other when Roseluck by randomly asked if Sunset wanted to go out with her. Sunset was really surprised about this question of all. But it turned out the reason why, because during these couple of months that had passed since after Sunset's breakup, Roseluck had fallen in love with Sunset. But she hadn't even realized what happened, because even despite Sunset had said that she didn't want to be dating anyone at any point at the moment, and she respected that her wish, but still though, her love for Sunset only grew stronger, and now when she had opportunity to ask her out, even though Sunset or Roseluck may understand that Sunset may not even say yes, but she had to ask her. And surprisingly to Roseluck, Sunset actually said yes. And they actually decided to go to a restaurant the same evening. When Twilight and other friends was told about this, they were equally surprised. And especially when Sunset had recently been only a few months earlier been in a breakup, and now she's going back into dating. But even in Sunset's mind, this date, well, she doesn't even know if this is going to be a long-term relationship or just one-time date. But she was willing to give Roseluck a chance to be dating. Who knows? Maybe this could have been the one that she has been waiting for, or maybe they had some things in common, and that Sunset may well give it a try. And even at the restaurant, both of them had no problem to have anything to talk about. They talked about all kind of things, like what they like to do, and what their dreams were when they were young, and even though Roseline was interested to know more about this outer world that Sunset had been spending time in before she came back home. Sunset actually answered some of the questions that she had, though. Even she had only one question to Roseluck. If she wanted to consider to be her girlfriend, even despite knowing that Roseluck may say no. But to her amaze, Roseluck actually said yes, she wanted to be her girlfriend, and even after their dinner at the restaurant, both of them actually had a great time. They didn't exactly realize about that time that their relationship were actually meant to be. Even after the whole this had happened, after after Sansa's recent breakup only a few months ago, and that her being heartbroken, she may believe she had found her true soulmate after all, and even especially in Roseluck. At some point that she thinks very beautiful, kind, generous. Even though her friends was really surprised that even though they weren't being together, but the relationship remained strong. They actually were very strong in relationship. Their feelings for each other only grew stronger for each single day. There were a lot of things between them was more than beyond they ever could expect it. Even though, even though that Sunset realized, had realized at the point, Roseluck was her true soulmate, and that even despite her boyfriend broke up with her only a few months earlier, she realized that stallion wasn't the one that he was looking for. It was in fact Roseluck all along. But there was a lot of things for Sunset that she didn't even expect them to happen because she wanted to take it slowly and Roseluck also. And just as for that, on their 2 years anniversary, Sunset had arranged to manage to get 2 tickets for a cruise for a whole week. And when she introduced this to Roseluck, she was ecstatic. She was so excited because she hasn't been on a cruise for a long time. And especially, this is going to be a couple cruise for them, both of them. And it was the perfect moment. And even on their cruise, they had a lot of fun. They watched the sunsets together. They even had a lot of romantic dinners and just enjoying the company's time. Despite it was only for about a week, but it felt like an eternity for both of them. Even when they came back home to Polonia, their lives had changed. Their love for each other had grown stronger. But it was one time when Sunset and Roseluck had this big fight. They were talking about where to celebrate their third anniversary. Roseluck wanted to celebrate on the first restaurant they went to. But Sunset wanted to do something more special. She wanted maybe to have it on maybe at Twalla's castle so they can have at least a view over of the town and the clear, clearly sky, night sky, and everything like that. Could even argue. They could even decide for which place to go to, or even that Sunset wanted to had to have the dinner at Sunset's like Twalla's castle. But they actually argued about this. In this argument, almost like that, Sunset decided she didn't want to argue anymore, so that she left the area and went back to the castle and didn't speak to Roseluck for nearly 2 weeks. At that time, Roseluck and even Sunset wanted to be with each other, but they couldn't even stand the thought about this after this big fight they had. But after 2 weeks, Sunset realized this terrible mistake they had. So she went to Roseluck's florist shop and asked if they could talk. And Roseluck said yes, and Roseluck apologized for the big fight, and even Sunset apologized as well. And both start laughing about this. But despite it has been 2 weeks their anniversary, they decide to have it at Twas Castle for once. And it was right. It was really the perfect place to have it because the environment, this the view of the full moon and clear sky was the perfect romantic atmosphere for having a perfect romantic dinner. Even both of them agreed never to fight like that ever again. Because even Sunset did mention, because she was almost closing to saying that it was over between them, and that surprised Roseluck. But she was really happy that Sunset didn't say that, because if she did, she would have missed out so much fun, so much joy with Sunset. On the fifth anniversary, Sunset actually took with Roseluck to the park, and proposed to her. And when she did, it was silent. For a only brief moment, it was silent. No one actually, no pony could even hear it. It was like hear the wind of the trees. It felt like an eternity. But when Roseluck did answer, she said actually yes, because she started crying. She couldn't even expect this question. But she was happy for this to be asked. And when the rest of the family and friends was told, they couldn't be more happier, especially for them both. Sunset had asked Twilight to be her bridesmaid, and Roseluck had asked Floodshine to be her bridesmaid. The wedding was going to have been held at the castle. They decided to have at least a smaller wedding ceremony. It was a great time. Even afterwards, when they have this big party that Pinky had arranged, it was epic. Every pony had a great time, having a good food, having dancing a lot, and even listening to some music. Both families could actually see how happy Roseluck and Sunset were when they looked each other deeply in the eyes when they first shared their dance together. That sparked the moment for both that they realized they were meant to be with each other. Later on, they actually went to a tropical island for their honeymoon, which that Twilight had arranged for them. And they were blessed to have a great time. They were great time on the honeymoon, with swimming in the ocean, like doing some sightseeing on the island, and just normally having a great time. When they came back home, both of them was actually being happy to have been had entered a new chapter in their lives. And 3 years later, Sunset and Roseluck had been talking about starting a family. So they had asked Twilight for help, and she didn't mind to help their friends. And Roseluck decided to be pregnant. And they were actually expecting at least maybe one baby. But when they found out she was expecting triplets, that shocked them both. And especially when Sunset was told, she fainted because of this or unexpected hurdle. But both were really expected to learn. They were expecting $2 and one son. They were ecstatic. And then the day came where their daughter, where the triplets was born. Their first daughter was named Aroma Lily. Aroma Lily, she was very excited as a filly. She loved to help around at the family home, but there was one thing that she loved to do the most, and that was in fact baking. And she loved spending time with her aunt Pinkie Pie at Sugar Cube Corner, and that sparked her dream to be a baker like her aunt. And when she told her parents about this, they didn't mind because they loved their daughter to be baking because she made a lot of cookies back home. And even though that when she was getting older, she was actually been taken in as Pinkie's sort of apprentice. And after she had taught her as much as she knew herself, she started working at Sugar Cube Corner along with the Cake Twins, at age 20. She loved her work. And even though she loved her family, but she loved baking as it was a true calling in life. And even particularly one time when she were into Stallion, which she fell in love with. They actually got married after being dating for about 4 years, and they had twin daughters of their own. Their second twin daughter was named Wonder Flower. She was actually loved to taking care of flowers as a filly. She loved to help around in the flower shop with her mom, Roseluck. And she learned a lot about different flowers when she says as a filly. Know how to what type of how to grow flowers, and she won't even want to work as a florist herself one day. Even when she was around 10 or 12, she actually helped around, and she even said that she's like her mom's assistant, which her mom didn't mind. After all, she, she wanted to be a florist like her mother. And when she was older, she was in fact taking over the florist job when Roseluck retired 11 years later. Even after all this happened, Wonderflower actually loved being taking care of the flowers with her mom. It actually did happen that her mom sometimes even helped her daughter at the florist job, despite that her mom had retired. But she wanted maybe just make sure that the florist shop went perfectly as they normally did. And even one point, Wonderflower actually fell in love with another stallion from town, and they even got married after being dating for about 5 years and had two sons and one daughter together. They named their son Dusk Rose, and Dusk Rose was unlike his sisters. He loved to read Daring Do with his mom and even play games with his friends and everything. But it was one thing when he was about 12, when he entered, when he is in school, joined the school newspaper. It was that sparked his interest to be a journalist. He wanted to learn more about journalism when that he actually had a friend who has a dad who worked at the local newspaper in Pulneville. And they actually went to talk to his dad, who was actually a journalist. And he talked about some things, how to be a journalist, and that sparked the more the interest to be as a journalist for Dusk Rose. And he wanted to be a journalist. And he said that he wanted to be one when he growing up. And that his friend's dad said, if you had a dream to be something like that, keep it alive. Do anything to reach your goal in life. That was I've been told when I was your age, and it helped me. And look at me, I'm a journalist, and I fulfilled my dream home. And from that sparked his interest to continue, and he loved to be continue to work as journalist at the school. And even though when he was finished, when after he graduated from school entirely, he had actually had a degree in journalism. And when he went back to Pune, they didn't hire any ponies though for to be journalist. But thanks to his friend's dad, who's still working as a journalist, had some friend who worked in Manhattan as a journalist. And they were actually looking for some journalists. And he moved to Manhattan and he got the job as a journalist. And he loved it. And even there, he fell in love with a doctor, which he later married after being dating her for about 2 years. And they later had twin sons, and a daughter together. And that, even despite happening after all of this, Roseluck and Sunset couldn't be more happier to be with some pony they loved the most. If the Roseluck hadn't even asked out Sunset at the park, they would have not been experiencing this true love of them together, and especially having this amazing family together. Even though Sunset though, if she would have haven't even decided to go back to dating, if she had said no to Roseluck, she would have missed out all of this. But she was loved to being happy to have found some pony like Roseluck. And this is how Roseluck and Sunset Shimmer found a true love got a big family. The end.